Hey guys, what's going on? John here, back again for another Magic the Gathering video, and in today's video we've got the first episode in a long while of Commander Showdown. In today's gameplay, we will be showcasing some new commanders from Commander Legends before the set is officially released. Now, I will preface this by saying, because we are playing new commanders and because of pandemic restrictions, we were unable to meet up in real life and not all of us had webcams. So, we decided to use an online service called Untap. I will link it in the description below, and we were able to play a game online using that. Now, before I get into the gameplay, I've got a couple things to go over, and the first thing to go over will be some channel promotions. So the first thing that you can do to help out the channel is just click the subscribe button. It is at no cost to you, it helps out the channel. We're on the road to 100 subscribers. Small milestone, but we're just getting there as time goes on. And if you subscribe, you will be kept up to date with my latest uploads, especially if you click the notification bell so you're notified every single time that I upload a video. Now, I also have a Patreon. There are tiers starting as low as $1 a month, and trust me, the rewards for the Patreon are very much worth it. You get to have your own customized commander deck techs, etc., and you also get to chat with me over patron messages. It would be a huge financial help because my channel is currently not monetized, and I do a lot of things on this channel for the enjoyment of others, but I would like to be able to continue buying boxes to be able to crack on the channel, which Patreon seriously helps with. Now that we've got those out of the way, let's get into some opening hands. So first up today is Asher playing Krark the Thumbless and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces partner pairing. Since the commanders are new, I will be reading them all off today. Krark the Thumbless is a 2/2 legendary creature, goblin wizard, costs 1 and a red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Partner. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces is a 3/1 legendary creature, human rogue, that costs 3 and a blue. You may have Sakashima enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima's other abilities. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Partner. Asher's opening hand contained 1 mountain, a Rite of Replication, Deflecting Swat, Okan, Eye of Chaos, Ancient Tomb, a mountain, and Preordain. Next up, we've got me playing Liesa, Shroud of Dusk. Liesa is a 5/5 legendary creature angel that costs 2 white, black. Rather than pay 2 for each previous time you've cast this spell from the command zone this game, pay 2 life that many times. Flying, lifelink. Whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 2 life. I kept an opener with 7 cards: Sangromancer, Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, Command Tower, Talisman of Hierarchy, Snuff Out, Well of Lost Dreams, and Auriok Champion. Next up we have Chris playing Araumi of the Dead Tide. Araumi is a 1/4 legendary creature, merfolk wizard, for 1 blue black. Tap, exile cards from your graveyard equal to the number of opponents you have. Target creature card in your graveyard gains Encore until end of turn. The Encore cost is equal to its mana cost. Chris kept 2 islands, a Deranged Assistant, Castle Vantress, Dismal Backwater, Panharmonicon, and Cavalier of Night. Finally, we have Cole playing Obeka, Brute Chronologist. Obeka is a 3/4 legendary creature, ogre wizard, that costs 1 blue, black, red. Tap, the player whose turn it is may end the turn. Cole kept a Training Center, Sneak Attack, Blood Crypt, Soul Ring, Unstable Obelisk, a Mountain, and a Nightscape Familiar. Now that we've gotten all the opening hands out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. Asher plays first and drops an island, playing Preordain, scrying 2 and drawing 1 card, then passing the turn. I draw, play a Command Tower, and pass the turn to Chris. Chris draws, and then plays a tapped Dismal Backwater for turn, gaining 1 life, passing the turn to Cole. Cole plays a Blood Crypt untapped for turn, shocks himself for 2, and then plays a Soul Ring, passing the turn to Asher. Asher untaps, draws, and then plays a Mountain, paying 2 for his first commander, Krark the Thumbless, and then passing the turn to me. I play a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, tap 2 for a Talisman of Hierarchy, and pass the turn to Chris. Chris untaps, draws, drops an island, and then plays Deranged Assistant for turn, passing the turn to Cole. Cole untaps, draws, drops a Drowned Catacomb for turn, and then tapping 3, he plays a Unstable Obelisk. He then taps his Blood Crypt and the Obelisk to pay 2 for a Nightscape Familiar. He then passes the turn to Asher. Asher drops an Ancient Tomb and then pays 4 for his second commander, Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, entering as a copy of Krark the Thumbless. He then attacks Krark at Cole for 2 damage and then pass the turn to me. I untap, draw, play my own Ancient Tomb as land for turn, and then I will pay 4 for a Sangromancer. I then pass the turn to Chris. Chris untaps, draws, plays a Swamp for turn, and then taps 4, milling himself for 1 with the Deranged Assistant, for Panharmonicon. He then passes the turn to Cole. Cole drops a Training Center, one of the new Battlebond lands, for turn. He then pays 3 for his commander, Obeka, Brute Chronologist. He then taps 2 mana to cast Lightning Greaves, and then moves to equip his Lightning Greaves to Obeka, passing the turn. Asher untaps, draws, and then he will play a Faithless Looting for turn. Asher flips 2 coins, and both of those coins come up as tails, which is what he chose. And he will make 3 copies of Faithless Looting. I gain 18 life from my Sangromancer, and he hits Chris for 4. I untap, draw, and then I pay 5 for my commander, Liesa, Shroud of Dusk. I then attack Cole for 3 with my Sangromancer and pass the turn to Chris. Chris taps his Deranged Assistant for 1, milling himself. Then plays a Castle Vantress as land for turn. And decides to tap 2 remaining for his commander, Araumi of the Dead Tide. He then passes the turn to Cole. Cole untaps, draws, plays a Prismatic Vista as land for turn, and immediately cracks it, paying 1 life to go find an island. Cole then passes the turn. On Cole's instep, I move to cast Snuff Out, targeting Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Asher has a response and promptly casts Deflecting Swat, targeting the Snuff Out. Asher flips 2 coins and wins 1 coin flip, changing the target of the spell to Nightscape Familiar, which does nothing because it reads non-black creature, and returning his Deflecting Swat for hand. He then untaps and draws, and pays 3 for a Browbeat. He flips 2 coins, getting 1 copy and returning the original to hand, and nobody is willing to pay the 5 life, feeling bad for him because he doesn't have many lands, and he draws 3 cards. He then plays a tapped Valakut Stoneforge as land for turn, and passes the turn to me. On my turn, I untap and draw, and then move to cast a Cradle of Vitality for 4. I then move to combat, attacking Chris with Liesa and Cole for 3 with Sangromancer. When I gain life from the Liesa trigger, I pay 2 in the Cradle of Vitality, but Asher again has a response, casting Deflecting Swat, getting 1 copy and returning the original to hand, and changing the target of the Cradle of Vitality ability to his commander, Krark the Thumbless, giving it 5+1/+1 counters. I then don't have another choice but to pass the turn, and Chris moves to untap. Chris plays a Swamp for turn, and then taps 5 of his mana, including milling himself for 1 with the Deranged Assistant, to cast a Gravebreaker Lamia. Its Enter the Battlefield trigger is copied by Panharmonicon, and he goes to tutor 2 cards to the graveyard, tutoring to the graveyard Wayfarer's Bauble and Stitcher's Supplier. He then taps his commander, Araumi of the Dead Tide, to give Stitcher's Supplier Encore, exiling 3 cards from his graveyard, making 3 token copies of Stitcher's Supplier, and milling himself for 18 with the Panharmonicon. He then attacks all 3 opponents with the Stitcher's Supplier, and moves to end step. They all die, and he mills himself for a further 9 cards. He passes to Cole, who plays a Swamp and passes the turn. Then passing to Asher, who untaps, draws, plays a Goblin Electromancer for turn, and then plays an island. He then taps his remaining mana to play a Zender Splits Judgment. He flips 2 coins, gets 1 heads and 1 tails, returning the spell to its owner's hand and copying it once. He chooses Chris as a foe, and he chooses me as a foe, choosing Cole as a friend. In response, Cole activates his Unstable Obelisk, destroying Chris's commander, and then the spell resolves. I return my Sangromancer to hand, Chris returns his Gravebreaker Lamia to hand, Cole makes a copy of his Nightscape Familiar, and Asher makes a copy of Sakashima. Asher then passes the turn to me. I untap, I draw, and I pay 3 for Kambal, Consul of Allocation, taking 2 from the Liesa trigger. I then attack Asher with Liesa, gaining 5 life, and then I tap my remaining mana to pay for the Cradle of Vitality trigger. Asher does not cast Deflecting Swat because he's low on life at this time, and I get 5 counters on my commander, passing the turn to Chris. Chris untaps, draws, drops an island, and then promptly taps 5 mana to cast his commander, Araumi of the Dead Tide. He then swings 4 at me with Gravebreaker Lamia, gaining 4 life, and passes to Cole, who untaps, draws, plays a mountain, and then attacks me with his commander, Obeka, Brute Chronologist. He then passes the turn to Asher. Asher untaps, draws, plays a mountain, and casts Zender Splits Judgment. Now he copies it 3 times, getting a total of 4 Zender Splits Judgment, wiping Chris and I's boards, and gaining Cole 4 copies of Nightscape Familiar, and Asher 4 more copies of Sakashima. This finally resolves, and he then goes to cast Browbeat, in total getting 3 copies. Now he targets Cole with one of these copies, but Chris pays for that copy. I pay for one of the copies targeting himself, and Cole pays for the other copy. In total, Cole, Chris, and I each take 5 damage, and Asher gets to draw no cards. Moving to combat, he then swings at Chris for 11 with his 2 commanders that have haste and his Goblin Electromancer. I then untap, draw, play Kambal, Consul of Allocation, and pass to Chris. Chris plays a Soul Ring, and then casts Sepulchral Primordial. The only targets he can hit are Niv-Mizzet Perun and Okon, Eye of Chaos, which he gets from Asher's graveyard. Cole untaps, plays a Phyrexian Arena, and attacks Asher with 5 of his 6 Nightscape Familiars and Obeka. Asher in total takes 6 damage from Obeka and some of the Nightscape Familiars, and then Cole drops Sneak Attack, passing the turn to Asher. Asher untaps, draws, attacks Chris with everything. Chris throws Niv Mizzet in front of Krark and blocks Goblin Electromancer and one of his Sakashimas, killing both, and then Chris is knocked out of the game. Asher then casts Chaos Warp. Chaos Warp targets are Kumbal, Sneak Attack, Phyrexian Arena, and the Cradle of Vitality. I flip up a Kaya's Guile on my first trigger. Cole flips a Sundial of the Infinite. I then flip a Felidar Sovereign, and Cole flips a Command Tower. Unsatisfied with me having a Felidar Sovereign, Asher then casts it again, getting 5 copies, targeting my Felidar Sovereign, Cole's Lightning Greaves, and 3 of his own Sakashimas. I get Sorin Markov, Cole gets a Swamp, Asher gets Sublime Epiphany, and 2 Mountains. This gets him enough to recast Chaos Warp. He then passes the turn to me, and I cast my commander, Liesa's Shroud of Dusk, and uptick Sorin, dealing 2 to Asher's face. Asher responds with Chaos Warp, getting 2 copies, targeting my commander and Sorin, which I flip into a Swamp and a Reliquary Tower. After the Chaos Warp resolves, Asher holds priority and casts Deflecting Swat, getting the 1 copy he needs to redirect Sorin's ability to my face, making me gain net neutral. He then goes to 3 from the Liesa trigger, and then I recast Sangromancer from my hand, passing the turn to Cole. Cole drops a Consecrated Sphinx, and then, not wanting me to run away with the game, passes to Asher. On Asher's turn, he casts a Rite of Replication Kicked, targeting the Consecrated Sphinx, getting 2 Rite of Replications in total and making 10 Consecrated Sphinxes. He then flips a ton of coins for Okon, making him in total a 24/24, which I block with my Sangromancer. My Sangromancer dies, Asher passes the turn to me. When I draw, Asher draws 20. Cole then draws 40 cards, and Asher draws another 20. I then pay 6 for a Pontiff of Blight, with 3 mana still up. I then pay 2 for an Auriok Champion, tapping my last mana to Extort, which kills Asher. I then pass, and on my instep, Cole casts Bedevil, targeting my Pontiff of Blight. On his turn, Cole drops Perforos Bronze Blooded, then a discounted Sire of Stagnation, then activates Perforos' ability to drop Ilharg the Razeboar and Niv Mizzet Perun. At this point, I see the writing on the wall, and I scoop up the game to Cole's massive amount of card. Now for some closing thoughts to the gameplay. The first deck I'd like to go over is Asher's Krark and Sakashima deck. This deck went off completely, made a ton of copies of its commander, a ton of Consecrated Sphinxes, but in the end being drained from Liesa and Kambal, and also being smacked by a ton of Niv Mizzet damage, and Cole's copies that Asher gave him came back to bite him, and he eventually was killed by my Extort triggers, otherwise he would have won this game. Next is my Liesa Shroud of Dusk deck. I think that Liesa is a really cool commander with a really cool concept, and this deck started to be able to do what it wants to do, but the game went so quickly that Liesa wasn't able to set up with Well of Lost Dreams. I believe that if I had set up with Well of Lost Dreams, I would have had this game, but I was never able to put it onto the battlefield, as I always had to respond to threats. Chris's Araumi of the Dead Tide deck had probably the worst showing of all 4 decks. Sadly, he was never really able to do much without his commander sticking. He milled himself for a ton with Stitcher's Supplier, but he was unable to do anything with that mill because his commander died every time he tried to cast it. Although he did get a ton of damage in on Asher with that Sepulchral Primordial and was able to contribute to killing him. Finally, Cole's Obeka Brute Chronologist deck. It basically got the lucky win. Cole was mana flooded for virtually the entire game, and when he dropped that Consecrated Sphinx, he was able to steal a win from Asher when I killed him with the Extort trigger. Now this deck is built really well, it just didn't have a great showing on camera as he kept pulling lands, but it does have a lot of fun sneak attack packages and a lot of cool ways to win. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on the notifications. And if you would like to, check me out on Patreon and possibly support me there. It allows me to continue running this channel and producing good content. If you guys like this series that I'm beginning now, please do leave a comment telling me you enjoyed it. And until then, I will see you later.